High school shooting traumatizes America. The Columbine Massacre that sparked continued debate across America. Prior to the Columbine shooting, nobody was aware that two teenagers could be capable of causing such a devastating event. Therefore, nobody really thought or talked about school shootings being a possible concern. However, the following events would help change America's entire outlook on schools and security. April 20th, 1999, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris opened fire on Columbine High School after a failed bombing attempt. As a result of the shooting, 15 lives were taken, including the shooters, and people across America began to mourn. Debates quickly arose, and people formed strong opinions on how we can keep American schools safe and never let another tragedy like this take place. These debates led to multiple years of failed diplomacy on gun laws and violence, causing the discussion to continue for decades. There had been many school shootings prior to Columbine, but none of them left such a detrimental impact on school safety. The main thing that set Columbine shooting apart from any of the previous attacks was the amount of involvement from the internet. Columbine was the first shooting to be extremely televised and have countless news reports. This publicity was used to display the detrimental impact to people who otherwise weren't involved. The current security of Columbine was extremely minimal. They had a security guard on duty, Neil Gardner, but he was at lunch during the moment of the attack. Even if he wasn't, he didn't have any training on what to do if an attack were to take place. Teachers, students, and police had absolutely no plans of what to do in the case of this unimaginable event taking place in a high school. For over a year prior to the shooting, Harris and Klebold created detailed plans for the attack. They spent many months together mapping out the school. Their goal was to cause the most destruction possible. The boys had extremely detailed journals and videos explaining what they wanted to do.
With guns.
Like with cut-off shot.
Guns are bad. When you saw them off and make them illegal, bad things happen to you. Just say no to sawed-offs.
In one of the journals, Harris stated, "I have a goal to destroy as much as possible." They talked about how many times they almost got caught, but got away with it. Their names had been brought up to the police several times prior for robbing a truck and threatening their fellow classmate, Brooks Brown, on their website. The boys managed to gain access to several weapons that they would later use to carry out the attack. This included dozens of homemade pipe bombs, a semi-automatic carabine, 2 sawed-off shotguns, and an in-track AB-10 semi-automatic handgun. During their planning period, Harris began to show signs of potentially severe psychological problems. FBI psychologists believe he may have been a sociopath based on what he wrote in his journals, but due to his death, they were never able to officially diagnose him. Harris was also known to have anger issues, but doctors and parents thought he had it under control due to the medication he was prescribed. Even with all the warning signs, nobody was aware of what was going to happen. April 20th, 1999, during the busiest time of Columbine High School's lunch hour, Harris and Klebold arrived at the school ready to attack. They had previously placed 2 burner bombs in the lunchroom that were set to go off around 11:15 a.m. If these bombs had gone off as planned, an estimated 500 people would have lost their lives. After the bombs failed to detonate, the boys began open firing on Columbine High. Outside of the school, they shot 8 students before entering through the cafeteria, only to find it had been mostly evacuated. After entering the school, they proceeded to shoot several more people, including Dave Saunders, a teacher who was in the halls because he was locking doors to keep students safe. The initial gunshot wound to the chest wasn't fatal, but after 3 hours, he bled out in the science room. Later in the library, they carried out most of their more brutal murders. They then turned the guns on themselves to complete the attack in a suicide. Police did not enter the school for several more hours because they weren't sure if the threat was gone. When the attack was over, there were 15 casualties, including Harris and Klebold, and dozens more were harmed. Though Columbine was not the first school shooting, it was one that would leave the largest lasting effect on America, provoking nationwide debate. Columbine was so heavily televised, and there were so many accessible details that the entire nation seemed to be involved, as well as the 2,000 students enrolled at Columbine High who would have to live with the lasting trauma and lifelong injuries as a result of the shooting. Unknown at the time, but this event also created the Columbine effect, resulting in the largest generation of school shooters. This also brought up the biggest question of the time. How are we going to keep our children safe? From school security to mental health resources, everyone has an opinion on what should be done. Since Columbine, there have been over 240 school shootings in America, and many of them are said to be inspired by Columbine. Many experts devote their time to understanding the shooters and trying to gain potential warning signs. Everytown Research and Policy says, understanding incidents of gun violence in schools is integral to effectively creating a comprehensive plan to address their threats and effects. People are also trying to gather and find a relation between gun control laws and school shootings in an area. Some Americans believe that we should use higher security in our schools. This could include police officers, metal detectors, searching school bags, or arming school staff. Much of the discussion also revolves around potentially giving students mental health resources to reach out to if they are struggling with suicidal or homicidal thoughts. One of the biggest things that has changed in schools is implementing policies that prepare students and staff in the event that an active shooter was in their school, such as lockdown drills and determining the nearest possible exit from every room. It is also highly recommended that schools attempt to create a positive school climate to discourage the potential shooting attempts. Even with these changes, many Americans say that attempts at diplomacy have failed due to the continued lack of gun control laws, specifically the access people have to certain types of guns. Columbine really opened the eyes of many people, displaying just how quickly disturbing fantasies can become a reality.